Wind swept snow piled like restless ghosts against a barn door when Elias Carver found her, knees buried in drifts, breath ragged as a trapped hare. He'd never wanted a wife, having buried his long, silent wife beneath summer wheat 2 years past. But when Lila Hayes looked up through frozen lashes, desperation blazing in her blue eyes, something thawed in his chest. He unhitched his mare, pressed a wool shawl over her shivering shoulders, and carried her inside, where firelight danced on rough-hewn beams. Outside, the Montana Territory's blizzard screamed across sagebrush plains. Inside, Elias wondered if offering warmth would cost him his solitude, or unlock the promise of a new kind of home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Snow swirled across Hollow Ridge Ranch like a spinning veil. Elias Carver stamped his boots before the barn's yawning portal, while caps cinched low. The storm had come swift, winds wailing through pines, drifts climbing over fence posts while he tended cattle in the corral. Now, in the flicker of lantern light, he glimpsed a figure slumped by a bony stall wall, shoulders heaving beneath threadbare skirts. He moved with rifle tucked under arm, every step echoing in the biting hush. The woman's hair lay plastered to her cheeks, ice crystals twisting in copper strands. Elias knelt beside her, breath swirling in front of his face. "Hey," he said, voice rough as a broken saddle. "You'll freeze out here." She lifted a hand, trembling like a birch branch. "Please, water." Her voice cracked with cold. Elias set down the rifle and fetched his canteen, pouring warm water into a tin cup. He pressed it to her lips. She drank with desperate gulps, eyes wide with something like faith. He offered her his wool shawl, dark gray, hand-woven by his wife before fever stole her last summer. "Wrap this round you," he murmured. Hesitation flickered in Lila's gaze, fear of strangers or ghosts in her past, but she tugged the shawl close, lacing its fringe beneath her chin. Inside the barn's warmth, embers glowed in a metal stove. Elias stacked split pine in the firebox, sparks leaping like fireflies. He snagged a blanket from a hay loft and spread it near the stove's hearth. Lila sank onto the hay, shawl wrapped tight, her teeth chattering. Elias held out a bowl of pemmican stew, fat, jerky, and root mash. She accepted with shaking hands. He watched her eat, memory tugging him back to Helen's kitchen, her gentle hands ladling soup when drought fever stole his brother, then his wife. He'd vowed to shut out loss, carving silence around his ranch like a fortress. But now her eyes, bright as winter stars, pressed into him with need he could not deny. Lila's lips trembled. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hushed as falling snow. Elias nodded, clearing his throat. "Name's Elias Carver. You'll tell me yours?" She swallowed, eyes downcast. Lila Hayes." He laid a hand on the stall's rough timber. "What brings you here?" He meant the storm, but she met his gaze with defiance born of hunger and fear. "I was run from town." Her words spilled like lead. "They said She broke off, cheeks burning beneath frost. Elias sensed a rumor's knife. Barrows and saloon hands had whispered scandal. Lila found the wrong place, the wrong time. Townsfolk quick to judge an unwed woman traveling alone in winter. He clenched his jaw. "No one chases you from here," he said. A sudden howl cut through the barn's rafters, a wolf's cry carried by wind. Lila flinched. Elias rose, adjusting his rifle, stayed by the fire. He motioned toward the open door, then paused. She nodded, clutching the shawl's edge. Elias stepped into the storm's roar, boots crunching in drifts, rifle raised. The wolf howled again, closer now, and Elias fired a warning shot high into the night. Snow plumes erupted where a pack had circled. Moments later, silence. Inside, Lila pressed her forehead against the stone hearth. Elias returned, coat dusted in snow, rifle slung across his back. He tossed a flake of wood into the stove. "Storm lasts till dawn," he said. You'll stay till then. Lila studied his lined face, eyes dark with secrets and regret. He placed a cup before her. Strong coffee sweetened with a pinch of jerky grease. She inhaled its steam, lost in memory. Elias watched, heart tugged by compassion and loneliness entwined. Hours passed in crackling fire and drifting snow until the barn door creaked. Footsteps, hard, deliberate, crunch outside. Elias braced by the door. Carver, called a low voice, jet black McCune, Hadley's foreman from Barrow's End. Elias stiffened. Lila's hand went to the shawl's fringe. McCune's lantern glow wavered on snow. His spurred boots neared the threshold. "Heard you harbor a stray," he sneered, voice thick with county gossip. Elias set his rifle aside. "She's welcome, dear." McCune spat. "Hadley's wagons froze on your claim. Spring run dry since you took in that woman. He send me to collect her or your deed." Lila's eyes flared. Elias stepped between McCune and the fire. "Not tonight." McCune's grin was sharp as a blade. "It's the law or pay the price." He turned, lantern bobbing. "Sunrise, Carver. Justice rides a ridge." McCune's spurs clacked on wood as he disappeared into the storm. Elias exhaled, shoulders slumped. Lila pressed a hand to her chest. "You risk your home." He met her gaze, amber from the stove. "No one drives you off my land." His voice was weary vow. He reached into his coat and drew out a simple iron ring. Helen's wedding band, worn flat as a river stone. He placed it on the stove's stone hearth. "Promise protect you, as I once did her." Lila knelt, eyes brimming with quiet tears. She retrieved the ring and placed it on her own finger. "I'll stand by you." Her voice was a whispered defiance. Elias guided her to the hay cot, tucking the shawl around her shoulders. He met her gaze one last time before stepping into the coal barn's doorway. He paused, listening to the wind's furious lament. Then he returned with extra firewood, stacking logs like prayers. As dawn's pale light filtered through drifting snow, Elias settled beside Lila, the ring warm against her skin. Outside, hoofbeats approached across the ridge, McCune's promise riding the wind. Elias drew a deep breath, memory of Helen's final smile breathing courage into him. Inside the barn, Lila cradled the shawl-shrouded warmth and met Elias's steady gaze. Beyond the door, the world held its breath, balancing between mercy and justice. A final wolf howl echoed across the ridge as hoofbeats drew nearer. Elias's hand moved to his Colt's grip. Lila squeezed the shawl's fringe, heart pounding. In the hush before confrontation, both knew the storm's mercy might not shield them from the coming reckoning. Dawn's gray light filtered through drifting snow as hoofbeats thundered against the barn door. Elias Carver stepped into the stall's gloom, rifle level at the shadowed form of Jed Black McCune. Snow clung to McCune's hat brim. Frost etched his cheek. Elias's pulse pounded like distant thunder. "You can't hide her here," McCune growled, spurs jangling. "Hadley's writ says she's evidence in the spring dispute." Elias's jaw set. "No warrant binds this barn." He stepped between McCune and Lila, shawl wrapped tight around her. Below, hay dusted splintered floorboards. Overhead, frost-laced beams held secrets of countless winters. McCune spat. "You owe Hadley your claim. Return the woman or lose your deed." He raised the ledger's page. Elias's gaze drifted to the wooden ring Helen had worn, now his copper cuff pressed against his ribs. He remembered her whisper at fever's edge, "Help those cast aside." He met McCune's glare. "I stand by my promise." McCune cursed, tucking the ledger into his coat. "This isn't over." With a boot kick to the door, he vanished into the storm's roar. Elias exhaled, voice hollow. "We need safer shelter." Lila's fingers trembled on the shawl's fringe. Her pale cheek, bruised by cold, gleamed with resolve. He swung open the barn door, the swirling wind. "Come on." He led her to the corral, where their mare waited, flank heaving. The storm had scoured fence lines, rails splintered. Jostling through drifts, they skirted the ravine and headed west toward Willow Creek Cabin. Widow Ruth McAllister, scarred by plague loss, owed Elias a kindness. She'd sheltered him when he'd buried Helen 2 winters past. As they crested a ridge, smoke coiled above pine boughs. Ruth's cabin door flew open before they knocked. Her shawl-clad form emerged, lantern in hand. "Elias, you're half-frozen." She guided them inside. Warmth enveloped them. Pine walls glowed orange. Stew simmered on a kettle stoked by a crackling stove. Lila sagged onto a woven stool, boots steaming. Ruth poured broth into wooden bowls. "Salt pork and turnip," she said. Lila accepted a bowl, inhaling aroma with hungry eyes. Elias sank into a chair, exhaling the night's terror. Ruth studied Lila's shivering frame. Not many would risk Hadley for a stranger. Elias tipped his head. "She's no stranger." Lila's fingers traced the shawl's pattern, sunset threads hugging her shoulders. She met Ruth's gentle gaze, voice quiet as embers. "You've helped me." Ruth nodded, voice soft. "I remember your Helen's kindness, said the world needs more quiet mercy." She ladled stew. "Eat up." Outside, the wind clawed at logs. Lila sipped the broth, simmering heat chasing frost. Elias studied her. Her scars blurred beneath firelight, eyes reflecting distant memory. He saw her steal, knife at port, hands scarred by survival. As Lila rose to clear bowls, Ruth turned away. "Saloons close you too, for fear of gossip." She set bowls on a shelf. "Barrows and whispers you harbor an outlaw's bride." She spat into the hearth. "Nonsense, but that's how it is." Elias exhaled. "We'll ride before the roads thaw." He stood, offering Lila his hand. She hesitated, then placed her palm in his. Trust sparkled between callous fingers. Night wore on. Elias and Lila sat by the stove, him mending her shawl, her bearing a tender moment as he threaded wool beneath flickering light. Each stitch wove their stories together. Helen's kindness, Lila's defiance. In silence, their bond deepened. A rap on the door fractured the hush. Ruth opened to Amos Kelly, trapper and friend to both. He strode in, frost frosting his beard. "Hadley's men passed half an hour ago," he said. "Tracking hoof to Willow Creek." Elias rose. "They'll be here by dawn." Amos laid a leather pouch on the table. "Spare supplies, flapjacks and pemmican. Hold off as long as you can." He shouldered his rifle. "I'll lead them astray." Lila pressed a hand to Amos's arm. "Thank you." Her voice was wind-soft. Amos nodded, lips tight. "Go. I'll stall them." He slipped into darkness. Dawn teased sky with pale lavender. Elias roused Lila, face drawn. He lifted her in a shepherd's brace, scarf trailing behind him like a banner of hope. Amos's detonation whistle echoed, a false call to distract pursuit. They reached the ranch gate as hoofbeats thundered behind. Lila dismounted, crouching beside the fence Aaron built. A single rail lay broken, wind scoured. Elias knelt beside her, voice low. "Hadley's men smashed this in last storm. You can fix it." He handed her nails and a hammer. Her fingers, once caged, now labored with purpose. She lifted the rail, hammered a spike through frost-shrunk wood. Each strike rang like dawn's resolve. Elias watched, heart-heaving. When she stood, the fence held firm, the shawl wrapped tight around her. Beyond the field, Hadley's riders emerged, a half-dozen grim faces, rifles at port, McCune in front, ledger in hand. Elias stepped forward, Colt in one hand. Lila stood behind him, scarf's fringe snapping in the wind. McCune called out, voice whistle-sweet. "Return her, Carver, or we burn your barn." He lobbed a ledger at Elias's feet. "Hadley's claim is final." Elias met Lila's gaze, her eyes calm fire. He drew the ledger forward and tramped it under boot. Claims only ink on paper. He extended a hand to Lila. "We ride for Willow Creek." Lila reached for the scalp of her scarf, Knocked it like a banner. I'm under his name now. Her voice rang through the field's hush. The riders paused, uncertainty flickering on their faces. McCune spat. You'll starve before you find refuge again. He reined his mount about. Hadley's threat lingered in the ledger's ash. Elias guided Lila from the yard, scarf trailing across frozen sage. Amos's whistle rose from the ridge, final lure. Lila's hand gripped Elias's arm. We trust him. Elias exhaled, eyes closing against stinging wind. We must. He lifted Lila onto his saddle's bow. She settled against his chest, scarf lashing bright as sunrise. Beyond them, boots faded on wood and snow, Hadley's wrath tempered by doubt. Elias and Lila rode off toward Willow Creek's promise. Snow-drifted plains, trials ahead, but bound by a fragile trust and the warmth of a shared destiny. Halfway to Willow Creek, the wind stilled. Ahead, smoke curled from a single cabin's chimney, deadly beacon. Lila's eyes narrowed. Elias's hand dropped his colt as they spurred toward the fire's glow, unknown refuge or hidden peril waiting within. Snow clung to Elias Carver's coat as he guided Lila Hayes down the drifted path. Each breath steamed in the pale dawn. Ahead, smoke curled above a squat log cabin. Amos Kelly's trapper leaned-to beside Tonquin Creek. Amos waited on the porch, lantern low in hand, eyes bright with relief. Elias lifted Lila from the saddle. Her boots crunched frost-laced meadowgrass. He scanned the ridge, no sign of McCune's riders, but every snap of ice twig echoed threat. Lila brushed snow from her scarf's fringe, eyes steady beneath copper brows. Elias saw her defiance. She would not be caged again. Amos opened the door with a low creak. Inside, firelight danced on spruce logs. A coffee kettle sang on the stove. Salted trout and pemmican loaf lay on a rough plank table. Elias released a breath he'd held since the barn's doorway. Lila sank onto a bench, scarf fallen to reveal a sleeve torn by icy briars. Amos set a steaming bowl before her. Eat, he urged, voice gravel soft. You need strength. Lila accepted the ladle, silence measuring gratitude. Elias watched her cheeks fill with color, the scarf's orange now a banner of her survival. Amos glanced skyward. Storms passed, but Tonquin's ice still breaks on the banks. We must cross before noon. He laid a weathered map on the table, ridges and creek bends traced in candle grease. Follow me. Outside, the creek roared beneath broken ice. Amos led them to a fallen pine spanning the water. Each step was a judgment. One false move and the current would claim them. Elias urged his mare onto the trunk. She skittered as Lila climbed behind him, hand pressed to his shoulder. At the creek's mid-span, the pine snapped beneath Lila's weight. She gasped, arms outstretched. Elias lunged, halter in hand, pulling her back toward stable ground. His heart thundered. Easy, he murmured, voice taut. She nodded, eyes glinting with calm. They retraced steps to a narrower ford upstream. Amos waded first, water rising to his knees, then passed a lariat to Elias. He tied it around his saddle horn, looping the other end around Lila's waist. Lean into me, he instructed. Lila nodded, voice soft as baying echo. I trust you. His memory flickered. Helen's gentle voice, urging him to shelter the helpless. He breathed in her farewell, be brave, and stepped into the ice. Cold hit like iron cuffs. Each footfall drew the rope taut. Lila hummed a soft Apache lullaby, song of water's blessing on dusk. The current tugged. Lila's grip slipped once. Elias tightened the rope's knot, guiding her forward. Their mare stamped on the bank ahead, water streaming from flanks. Elias emerged soaked to his thighs. Lila stepped from the creek, scarf clutched tight. Amos hauled him free. Elias nodded in thanks. Each breath a promise. Snow-swept pines lined the bank as they secured their mounts. They rode toward the trapper's cabin on ice-crusted saddles. Lila's eyes flicked to the path ahead. Battered planks and rotted rails from Hadley's men, an ominous sign. Amos fell back. They left tracks here, came to scout this crossing first. His face shadowed. Elias pressed his hand to Lila's shoulder. We push on. He guided her along a game trail toward higher ground. The ridge's bare pines loomed dark against iron sky. Lila rode with posture erect, scarf trailing behind like sunrise's echo. Elias watched her, heart open. She had saved him at the creek, agency forged in ice and fear. His wound throbbed, but her strength bolstered him. They reached a rocky hollow where a battered saloon stood, Dusty's way station. Its door swung by wind. Amos halted. You should not cross here. He reached inside his coat and drew a folded note. Hadley's writ, threatening to seize Elias's deed if Lila remained on his land. Elias crumpled the paper beneath his boot. Justice is more than ink. He turned to Lila. Shall we test that? Inside, floorboards moaned beneath their boots. A handful of men huddled by the hearth. Hard eyes. Cheap whiskey. The barkeep, Tom Lewis, poured shots. He froze as Lila entered, scarf bright against broken planks. The men spat curses. Tumbleweeds rattled outside. One cowboy sneered, voice oily. Ain't no woman's business in a man's saloon. He leveled a Colt at their mare outside. Elias's Colt was in hand. He stepped between Lila and the bartender. Leave her be. The cowboy laughed. Unless you pay Hadley's toll. He spat. Lila's pulse flickered, memory of her brother's face when Apache scouts raided their homestead, betrayal of her kin. She reached into her pocket, withdrew the iron ring Elias had placed on her hand. She dangled it before the cowboy's eyes. I bear more weight than land claims. Her voice, low and firm, halted the man. He blinked, jaw slack. The others eyed her, curiosity beating prejudice. The bartender stepped forward. No trouble here. He slid the Colt back under the bar. Eyes flicked to Elias, then Lila. A silent truce settled, like ash on embers. Tom Lewis nodded to Elias. Food and ale on the house. Elias accepted a bowl of stew. Lila sipped cider. Amos slipped outside and loosed the horses. When they remounted, Tom handed Elias a canteen. For the trail. They rode on, leaving the saloon's lantern glow behind. The wind sharpened, carrying scent of snowmelt and pine burn. Each hoofbeat carried them toward the ridge's crest, where an ominous storm front churned. Lila's gaze drifted skyward. Thunder. Her voice was a soft drum. Elias looked at clouds, steel and slate rolling east. Amos reined in. Clear creeks below the holdover cliffs. A flash flood could sweep the crossing. Elias's heart twinged. His wife Helen's final word, protect the lost, echoed. He shook his head. We press on. He guided Lila through bramble and boulder, boots bucking in frozen earth. They reached a slender bridge of willow, felled by flood's last fury. Planks gaped. Water roared beneath, milky with silt. Elias dismounted, testing boards. They groaned under his weight. He turned to Lila. Cross with me. She slid from the saddle, scarf wrapped high. He clasped her hand, voice low. Lean into me. She nodded, trusting his river to bank. They stepped onto the bridge's center. Planks cracked and buckled. Water spurted upward where support splintered. Elias half ran, dragging Lila behind him. Midway, a thunderous crack. Plank gave way. Lila fell, scarf snagging a nail. Elias lunged, gripping her arm. She yanked free, scarf tearing. He hauled her upright, face ashen. She blinked, breath catching. I'm fine. She touched the torn scarf's fringe. We survive. His arm trembled around her. He knelt, checking her boots for frostbite. Each breath was a victory. He wrapped her in his coat, scarf's remnants draped over both shoulders. They stumbled from the bridge as it collapsed into the creek. A roar of water and splintered wood echoed in the gorge. Amos stood on the far bank, rifle held, eyes bright. He'd watched the crossing. He nodded. Beyond the bridge, The path climbed through wind-scoured pines toward Hollow Ridge Ranch. Moonlight cut pale tracks through snow. Lila pressed his hand. You saved me again. Elias wiped the sweat slush from his brow. You saved us both. His voice trembled with confession. She touched his cheek, cold as dawn but fierce. We belong together. They rode on, scarred bridge a distant memory beneath flood's roar. The night pressed close, wind scoured their faces, but in their shared warmth, Elias's coat and the scarf's ragged fringe, they found defiance against prejudice, loyalty that no flood or Rick could drown. As they neared the ranch's gate, a rider's silhouette loomed on the ridge, tall as the world's judgment. Spurs glinted. Hadley's writ was rumored to burn in McCune's coat pocket. Elias tightened his fist on the rein, heart daggered by resolve. Lila pressed her bandaged arm to his chest. He's come. The night held its breath as dawn's pale promise hovered on the ridge. Hoarfrost glittered on fence posts when Elias Carver and Lila Hayes reached Hollow Ridge Ranch's gate. Beyond lay his weathered barn, shelter he'd built with Helen's hands, now draped in winter's hush. But jet-black McCune stood astride his mare on the ridge, ledger in hand, and spurs glinting like falling stars. Elias slid from his saddle, Lila at his side. The wind clawed at pines, carrying McCune's voice. Return the woman, Carver, or I void your deed at dawn. He raised the writ with a flourish. Elias met McCune's gaze, voice low and steady. No law makes a property. He planted his colt on his hip, boot dusted in snow. Lila pressed her scarf's fringe around her face, orange defiance amid gray. McCune laughed, harsh as cracking ice. Hadley's wrung every drop from the judge. You'll lose more than land. He drew a revolver, barrel trembling in his hand. Lila stepped forward, voice cool as morning frost. You'll not harm him. She squared her shoulders, ring glinting on her finger. At 12 paces, she produced a small steel knife, an Apache hunting blade she'd carried since the barn. McCune's eyes narrowed. Stay back, woman, he snarled. Lila advanced, blade leveled. I've faced worse than you. In a swift move, she flicked the knife free, catching McCune's wrist. The revolver clattered to the snow. McCune howled, hand over bleeding bone. Elias lunged, snapping shackles across McCune's horse lead. The mare reared, sending McCune sprawling in snowdrifts. Lila moved to Elias's side, breath steady, eyes bright with triumph. McCune roared, scrambling for his colt. Elias's colt barked twice, bullets lodging in frozen earth. McCune froze, lips quivering. Lila sheathed her blade, scarf draped over McCune's wrist as makeshift binding. Consider this mercy, Elias said, voice echoing across the frozen yard. McCune's eyes flicked between them, fury and fear wrestling. He spat into the snow. You'll pay for this. Then he slumped back, defeated by steel and resolve. Elias helped Lila mount her mare. His side ached. A shard of wood from the cabin hatch had nicked him when Jonas's hatchet slammed. A line of blood trickled beneath his coat. He touched the wound, voice tight. I'm hurt. Lila dismounted, pressing her scarf to his side. The wool brimmed red as sunset. She knelt, knotting the fringe into a tourniquet. Hold still, she said. Her touch was steady as river rock. He drew a breath, recalling Helen's last whisper. Protect the lost. Now Lila's hands honored that vow. He winced, revealing pale skin beneath the wound. She paled at the sight. I'm sorry. He laid a hand over hers. You saved me. A sharp whistle sounded, a warning from Amos Kelly, perched on a high fence. He rode in on fresh mare, rifle ready. Hadley's men will scatter and return with reinforcements by dusk. His breath steamed. Elias clenched the tourniquet. We can't hold them here. Amos nodded. I'll draw their fire. You and Lila ride for town. Seek Sheriff Hale's counsel. Lila's gaze flicked past the ridge. Smoke from the sheriff's cabin rose pale against steel sky. We go, she said. She helped Elias to the mare's saddle, scarf binding his ribs. He winced but gripped the pommel. As they rode off, Amos lifted his rifle. Snow-crusted dust rose. His whistle carried down the hollow. McCune stirred, rage flickering as reinforcements clattered through barns. Amos's lone stand bought the moments. They galloped toward town, forested ridges framing each hoofbeat. Elias swayed in the saddle, his breath caught in ragged gasps. Lila urged him forward, voice firm. "Stay with me?" He pressed her hand. Scarfs warmed a lifeline. At the sheriff's cabin on Frost Creek Road, Deputy McAllister waited, lantern in hand. He raced to soften the door against wind. Inside, Sheriff Elias Hale, a broad-shouldered man with silver mustache, rose from his desk. McAllister snapped the ledger closed. Carver's deed is void by Hadley's writ. Carver claims Lila as kin, deed transfer at stake. The sheriff studied Elias's wound. We'll need proof of a bond. Lila pressed forward, voice unwavering. He saved me. She removed the scarf's fringe, pressing it into Hale's hand. This binds us. Hale eyed Elias. Marriage by frontier customs, consent and witness. You'll swear before us. Elias nodded. I ask only protect her. Hale slid the ledger across his desk. Sign here. Elias hesitated, then pressed his thumbprint into the ink. Helen's ring on his finger brushed each stroke. Lila signed her name, ring glinting in lantern light. The sheriff stamped the ledger. Carver, Hayes, within witness of law. Outside, wind rattled shutters. Lila inhaled, voice soft. We belong. Elias met her gaze, scars and soot etched in lamplight. Together, he whispered. Sheriff Hale nodded. Hadley's writ is null. He collected the ledger. I've served Hadley notice, no further claims. He tipped his hat to Lila. Welcome, Mrs. Carver. They rode home under starlit skies. Elias's mare bore them through drifted plains toward Hollow Ridge Ranch. The wind's howl was tempered by newfound hope. Lila pressed Elias's hand. The scarf's remnants clasped in her palm. Arriving at the barn, Amos greeted them, face alight with kindness and sorrow. His mare grazed beneath the loft. They've scattered, he said, but the ridge's embers still glow. He nodded to the barn's flickering lantern light. Elias dismounted, limp but determined. Lila helped him inside. Firelight danced on timber as he set her shawl, now ragged proof of their bond, over the stall's rail. He greeted the mare with a pat. Home. Lila pressed the scarf's last threads to the hearth, then crushed them into ash that drifted like memory. Elias watched the embers swirl. He drew her close, voice hushed. No more storms, Lila. She met his gaze, eyes wet as dawn. We'll weather any. Outside, wind scoured the ridge's bones. A final note lay on the barn door, Hadley's signature scrawled across a fresh writ of appeal. Elias crushed it beneath his boot. Inside, under lantern's glow, Elias and Lila stood among hay and hoofprints, heartbeats echoing through timbers. Their bond, sealed by scarf and deed, waited for morning's light, when the promise of new life on Hollow Ridge Ranch would rise with the sun. A distant rumble rolled across the valley, wolves on the prowl, or thunder on the wind, or perhaps both. Elias drew his Colt, Lila at his side. Outside, the dark held its breath as their chosen family braced for the next trial. Dawn's first light filtered through frost-choked pines as Elias Carver stood at the ridge's crest, Colt in hand and heart pounding. Below, Hollow Ridge Ranch lay silent beneath snow's hush. Barn roof bowed, fence rails mended by Lila's steady hand. Yet a dark shape moved on the horizon. George Hadley himself, riding with a dozen men, ledger clutched like a gauntlet. Elias exhaled breath like smoke. His ribs throbbed. With shard injuries still bled beneath his coat, but he squared his shoulders. Helen's whispered vow echoed in his mind. Protect the lost, Elias. He glanced at Lila, her copper braid glinting like dawn star. She pressed the wool shawl's torn fringe to her cheek, orange bright in snow, and nodded, eyes steady. Amos Kelly emerged from the barnyard, rifle slung, face drawn with exhaustion and relief, his mare stamp hoofprints in drifts. "They came," he rasped. Elias's gaze held Amos's. "Stay near." They rode toward the corral. Levi's gate opened wide as promise or challenge. Lila and Elias dismounted beneath pines spraying glittering frost. Hadley's riders formed a crescent at the fence's edge, Colt barrels gleaming. Hadley himself, tall, gray-eyed, dismounted and strode forward. "Carver," he called, voice hard as frozen earth. "My patience ends today." He flourished a new writ, sheriff's seal, judge's signature. "This revokes your claim. The spring and land pass to my heirs unless you yield." Elias met Hadley's steely gaze. "No writ binds her worth." He planted his spurs in snow. Lila stepped beside him, hands empty but spirit full. She raised the torn shawl above her head. "This bound me once," she said, voice rising like wind through pines. "But I'm free." She dropped the scarf's last threads, snow catching each braid like falling petals. Hadley's jaw twitched. He barked a laugh. "You think law bends for a runaway woman?" He turned to his men. "Seize her now." Blades of snow spat as riders raised rifles. Amos's rifle leapt to his shoulder, hammer clicking. He fired once at the air. The shot rang like verdict. Then neighbors, Tom Ryder the trapper, Widow Ruth McAllister, even taciturn Deputy McAllister, emerged through barn and cabin doorways, sidearms drawn. Their faces were hard with kinship. Hadley's men faltered. Elias sheathed his Colt and raised his hand. "She's under my name now, legal wife of Elias Carver." He reached into his coat and withdrew the signed marriage ledger, pages inked and stamped. He held it before Hadley. "This is law." Hadley spat. "A marriage signed under duress." Ruth stepped forward, voice ringing. "Under justice. You'll not bully this ranch." Her cane tapped frost. "She's Mrs. Carver." Neighbors echoed her nods. Hadley's eyes flicked between ledger and crowd. He cursed, twisting the writ in his fist. Then he flung it to the snow. "This isn't over," he snarled, remounting. His men trotted off, spurs carving arcs in drifts. The hush that followed was like an exhalation. Lila dropped the scarf's ash, kneeling to brush it into snow, a gesture of freedom, not sorrow. Amos lowered his rifle, head bowed. Elias reached down, offering his hand. Lila rose, eyes warm. He pressed the ledger into her palm. "This is yours." She held it as precious as a child's first step. Later, beneath the barn's lantern glow, Elias and Lila stood before a rough pine table. He laid a fresh ranch deed atop it. Hollow Ridge Ranch, signed Elias and Lila Carver. He carved Lila's name beside his own. Then he took the iron ring, Helen's wedding band now reshaped into a plain silver circlet, and placed it on Lila's finger. His voice trembled. "Our home is yours, as you are mine." Lila's fingers closed around his, eyes glistening. "Thank you, my husband." Her words were both vow and echo of Helen's kindness. They stepped outside into starlit plains. Patches of drift lay like pale glass beneath the moon. Elias drew Lila to the fence, pulling her close. Snowflakes caught in their hair. He whispered into her hair, "You've saved me." She pressed her cheek to his chest, heart steady as river rock. "We save each other." Days passed in snowmelt and thaw. Neighbors brought gifts, a barrel of salted pork from Ruth, rye flour from Tom Ryder. Amos arrived with a limp. An arrow had splintered his calf, saving Elias in the barn. But he grinned through pain. "Your grapevine fence will hold 1,000 winters now." Lila tended Jonas's marker by the creek, small cairn of stones beneath a willow, whispering Apache prayers. She pressed a handful of wildflower seeds into snow. For new life, Elias repaired the buck fence, each rail milled from pine hewn by Amos's axe. Lila hauled split logs and stacked core beside the barn. Her hands were calloused and sure, each knot in firewood a testament to her purpose. One evening, beneath firefly lanterns in the yard, Deputy McAllister tipped his hat. "Folks at the saloon asked for you." He offered a letter embossed in Hadley's seal, apology nested in hubris. Hadley yielded the spring rights quietly, paid repair costs, and asked only a nod to save face. Elias exhaled as he read. Justice, not spite. He folded the letter into his breast pocket. Lila pressed her hand to his arm, eyes reflecting lantern glow. At summer's cusp, they planted garden rows, beans, turnips, heirloom peas. Lila knelt at each furrow, sowing seeds in Apache prayer stones, memory of her lost brother guiding new growth. Elias knelt beside her, pressing seeds into earth, coat sleeves dusted with soil. In each seed lay promise, their shared redemption, the quiet bloom of family. One golden dawn, neighbors gathered for a barn raising, rails lifted on poles, hammering echoing promise across fields. Widow Ruth passed crooked nails to Lila, who hammered with steady rhythm. Tom Ryder hoisted beams as Elias guided each timber into place. Amos, healed enough to walk with staff, carved the ridgeboard's inscription. Carver, Hayes Homestead, EST 1876. As the final nail rose to meet sun, Lila stepped back, shawl's fringe repurposed as banner above the door. The crowd applauded, no longer whispers but genuine respect. Faces that once spat rumors now nodded in solidarity. At the barn's threshold, Elias and Lila stood hand in hand. Lila raised her eyes to him, voice soft as wind through wheat. "We have a home." Elias pressed her hand to his heart. "And a future." The wind whispered through pines, carrying their laughter across the ridges. The scarfs Ashley buried beneath the barn's floorboards. The ring glinted on Lila's finger, and the deed hung framed in the cabin's hearthroom. Under Montana's wide sky, they took the first steps of their life together. Two souls forged by storm and mercy, bound by respect and love, heirs to a land they would cultivate with hope and unbroken promise. And as dawn's gold spilled over Hollow Ridge, firelight danced on sage and timber, bearing witness to the quiet triumph of freedom, family, and the love Elias never wanted until he found her freezing by his barn, and offered more than warmth.